Start your engines.
The PPG Indycar World Series has a pedigree stretching back to the turn of the century. These days it's dynamic, exciting, colourful competition. 16 races in 7 months on streets, ovals and purpose-built circuits. For 1993, the reigning Formula One World Champion Nigel Mansell opted for Indycars with the Newman-Haas team, joining a prestigious list of champions and would-be champions. Bobby Rahal, who won the title in 1992 for the 3rd time. Scott Goodyear, 33 years old, Toronto-born. Alan Jr., the champion in 1990. 46-year-old Emerson Fittipaldi, twice a Formula One World Champion, who won Indycars in 1989. Mansell himself, the first reigning Formula One World Champion to switch to Indycars. His teammate Mario Andretti, another double champion, Formula One in 1978, Indy 4 times since 1965. Danny Sullivan drove for Tyrrell in 1983, won the Indy title in 1988. Raul Boesel, the brilliant Brazilian. Harry Leyendyk, Dutch-born, but coming off a disappointing 92. Paul Tracy, 24-year-old from Canada, the pick of the young talent. And Robbie Gordon, another 24-year-old ready for his first full season with AJ Foyt. Rookie of the Year, Stefan Johansson, Formula One experience with McLaren and Ferrari. One of the facts of IndyCar life, rolling starts. Unlike Formula One, from a static grid, Indy races begin after a warm-up lap as the pace car pulls off. Caution flags, on-track incidents bring out the yellows. Field concertinas up behind the pace car until it's safe to resume racing again. It's a system that produces close finishes, exciting duels, races within races. Pit stops, a major part of the spectacle. No more than 6 crew members allowed over the wall to work on the cars. Specialities, tyre changing and refueling. Methanol pumped into the 40-gallon tanks at a standard rate. It's 20 points for a win, even a point for 12th place. There's a maximum of 22 available at each race, with 1 for the fastest qualifier and for most laps led. The 1992 champion Bobby Rahal won his first title as owner, driver and his 3rd in all by 4 points from Michael Andretti, the defending champion. It went down to the last race of the season at Monterey.
Heading now for the final corner and the pit straight, and turning up toward Nick Bonaro's final checkered flag. Michael Andretti on the pit straight now. A perfect day as he takes the win for the Newman-Haas team in the Kmart, Texaco, Haviland, Lola. Now here comes the new champion as Bobby Rahal raises his fist in salute to his pits, and he takes the checkered flag as the champion for the IndyCars in 1992, his 3rd IndyCar championship.
Bobby said, guys, we did it! Start your engines.
For the past 3 years, the season's begun not at home in the USA, but overseas at Surfers Paradise on Queensland's Gold Coast in Australia. The 2.8-mile street circuit, the 1993 race, attracted unprecedented media attention, most of it centred on Nigel Mansell's IndyCar debut.
Pace car is off, green is down, and the 1993 IndyCar season is underway. And a great move by Emerson Fittipaldi, and indeed, there goes Paul Tracy right with him. Alongside Emo, tried the move, couldn't get by. Fittipaldi leads from Tracy, and Mansell from the pole slips to 3rd. Everyone working safely through that chicane, and you were exactly right. Tracy took a shot at him.
Tracy took a shot at him. Emo was alongside him, got ahead of him. Not used to the turbocharged lag, of course, which they experience on the start there, and is used to going from a standing start instead of a rolling start. Maybe he has a little problem too, because already we see Robbie Gordon up alongside him.
Indeed, Gordon makes a quick move around Mansell, and the world champion and pole sitter has been relegated to 4th spot. Perhaps he's gone back there to look for Mario Andretti, who runs in 5th. Mario's suggestion to Nigel about learning how to race Indy cars was, quote, "Follow me." Maybe Nigel's planning to do that.
Yeah. And if he doesn't think these drivers are aggressive, he's very wrong. You see him there putting a little blocking maneuver on teammate Mario. I wonder what Mario says about that.
Out front, Fittipaldi opening up the advantage, and a great move by Gordon up into 4th spot, driving for the legendary A.J. Foyce. The rest of the field working through, and a moment right there.
That is the Robbie Gordon. What was he doing back there? And that is number 19, Jimmy Vasser, coming into this series.
There's your top 5.
And Nigel hoping his debut in IndyCars is a lot better than Michael's in the Formula One series. And if you don't think Nigel Mansell's a draw, at Laguna Seca last year, they had a core of about 35 international sports and motorsports writers that would never normally be at the events. And it was just because Nigel was going to be appearing there, looking at the cars. This was right after he announced he would be driving.
Problem in the pit area and on pit road is the
Mark Smith, the Californian.
Yeah, with a mechanical problem. And
here we see Nigel going past Paul Tracy, who locked him up going into that left-hander.
And I'm wondering if Tracy may have a problem. That was a nice move by Mansell, who reacted and took what was given to him. But the question now must be, what of Tracy?
Well, Tracy was delayed in the pits with less than 15 of 65 laps completed. It was Fittipaldi in the lead from Gordon and Mansell. Mansell deciding to attack at this point, picking off first Robbie Gordon for second, and then charging on to catch Fittipaldi. Mansell, the fastest man on the track and the most determined. He took the first opportunity to squeeze past for the lead, but concentrating on the maneuver, failed to spot the yellow flag. No overtaking allowed. And a surprised Fittipaldi appealed over the pit-to-car radio, pointing out Mansell's illegal action. There was no doubt that Mansell would have to be called into the pits for a 10-second stop-and-go penalty. But in the event, that was of less concern than the state of his tyres, damaged as he left his braking seriously late to take Fittipaldi. Ultimately, the penalty not as damaging as it might have been. Mansell, after a full round of pit stops, emerged in the lead again, with less than half the race completed. And there were other Formula One refugees enjoying an eventful race.
Chiva getting it all wrong at the chicane. Oh, is he lucky not to make contact with Guerrero?
I don't know if he got it all wrong or all right. He passed a couple of people coming through there. He just took a different line.
He also messed up the suspension a bit and locked it up coming into there.
Yeah, he was very lucky that he didn't hit anybody. No chance to save it. He'll go straight through the gravel pit and say, look out, guys, coming through.
Oh, I bet Guerrero's like, whoa, where's this guy coming from? You're not allowed to do that. Got a lot of gravel and stuff on his tires there.
Midway through the race, and Mansell was driving as hard as he knew how.
The fuse is lit on the red 5 because he's got to race away from this field by a large enough interval to allow him to make that extra pit stop, then get back out on course, if not in the lead, at least close enough to the lead to be able to pull off his first ever IndyCar victory. And that's going to take a bit of doing here. We're inside 20 laps, 18 to go. So the strategic pressure right now is all on Nigel Mansell, and I would think he's a man capable of rising to that occasion.
I think so. I think you'll find what he's doing is trying to build up enough of a lead so that when he does make his pit stop, which will probably take about 20 seconds because they will be the first pit, and then he can come booming out, get a good run down the pit lane and come out at full speed. I think we'll see him make that stop at about lap 55.
This is the final and pivotal pit stop of the 1993 IndyCar Series opener. 6 men over the wall for tires and fuel.
Skipping tires. They were prepared to change them, and then they have not changed the tires. They decided not to. It's going to take too much time, and he's obviously happy. He wants warm tires, and he thinks he's going to hang on and be good enough to get him to the end.
They are on the last lap, and red 5, Nigel Mansell, is about to put into the book the first rookie victory, an IndyCar driver. He'll be the first IndyCar driver to win his first race since Hill in the Indy 500 back in the 60s, and I think more importantly, he will have justified the worldwide interest in this series that his presence has created. Look how close these guys got. Their 4-rider scrap has carried them close to Nigel Mansell.
Ooh, I think Gordon looked down the inside there, no?
He sure did. He had a notion, but Nigel Mansell backed off the pace and will finish just this much in front of Emerson Fittipaldi for second. And Fittipaldi will...
Robbie Gordon did get by, and now he's looking down to get past Emma. He's right on him.
He'll take a shot at him, too, on the final lap. That is the battle for second and third. Rahal fell off the pace on the last lap.
History made then by Nigel Mansell, the first rookie to win his debut IndyCar race from pole position. The only other debut winner, double world champion Graham Hill, who was first in the Indy 500 in 1966. An auspicious start for the world champion, but in his moment of glory, he was also being warned just how different oval racing would prove. Mansell with an immediate 4-point lead in the championship over Fittipaldi after surface. Also notable, Gordon's impressive start, Andretti's 4th place finish, and Leyendijk's first points for over a year. 2 weeks later, in the heat of the Arizona desert, the next IndyCar race began without the winner from surface paradise. Nigel Mansell had crashed into the Phoenix wall at about 180 miles an hour and was laid up in hospital. This after what he described as the biggest accident of his career. Scott Goodyear started from pole, Mario Andretti second quickest in qualifying, Fittipaldi, Guerrero, Tracy and Bazell the next in line for a grueling race 200 times around the 1 mile oval. Mario Andretti making the best start into the lead from Goodyear. Andretti in charge despite a late engine change after problems in the warm-up on race day. Andretti, Goodyear, Fittipaldi, Guerrero, Tracy the order. Andretti hadn't won a race for 5 years. The critics thought his best days were long gone, but Phoenix was a renaissance. Fittipaldi running third until his teammate Tracy started to improve, carving past Guerrero for 4th.
Tracy taking a look on the inside of teammate Emerson Fittipaldi, and he makes the move.
Boy, shot past him like he was standing still. In fact, opens up some distance. Paul Tracy moves into second place and is leaving his teammate.
He's also about to go around Mario Andretti on the outside.
Mario got caught up in slower traffic, and we've got ourselves a new leader. That's exactly what we were talking about. If you get caught behind somebody slower, now right there, Paul's caught behind a little traffic, giving Mario a chance to maybe pull up. That's a Hiro Matsushita that Tracy's trying to get around and put a lap down. There is Emerson Fittipaldi. Fittipaldi now running third. And I'm wondering...
that's in his backup car, too.
I'm wondering if he's pacing a little bit here or if he has a potential problem because he is letting some distance get between he and Mario. They're about 2-3 car lengths. Tracy is destroying this field right now.
That's Ross Bentley and Marco Greco already. That's the second time he has lapped them.
They are 2 laps down. That is right, 2 laps down.
After 63 laps, Bobby Rahal crawled into the pits, the car with a serious handling problem that was getting worse by the minute. Rahal, in partnership with Carl Hogan, was running his own chassis, rather than the standard Lola or Penske that's prevalent in IndyCar racing. This was a severe setback. The car languished on pit road, the problem unsolved. Phoenix, it seemed, would be a young man's race, with AJ Foyt's protege, Robbie Gordon, making ground midway through.
That's Robbie Gordon going outside of Mario Andretti. That's 2 generations of racing. And Gordon makes the pass stick, and he's closing in on Guerrero. And yes, folks, that is for position.
Good race going on between Roberto Guerrero and Robbie Gordon.
Guerrero in third, Gordon in fourth. Let's watch this through turns 3 and 4. The young lion, Robbie Gordon, is reeling in Roberto Guerrero. Now remember, this is Chevy versus Ford, both of them running Lola chassis. Look at Gordon on the inside. Oh, and he gets held up and slides to the outside, forcing Guerrero up high. Gordon makes the pass stick. He takes third place. Now, this is the man he tangled with earlier today, almost the same spot. He gets by Buddy Lazier easily this time. Guerrero gets slowed up momentarily, and look at the margin that Gordon has opened up. He checks his mirrors, and he knows he's got third place.
Lap 134, Gordon lost control and hammered into the wall at turn 2. It was a huge crash. Running third, Gordon was in traffic. The car perhaps affected aerodynamically, and there was no way back. Gordon emerged angry. His mentor was phlegmatic. These things happen in racing. Once the wreckage of Gordon's car had been cleared, Tracy extended his lead with a succession of brilliantly fast laps. But trying to pass Jimmy Vasser, he was suddenly in trouble. Tracy lucky that the rear of the car took most of the impact. Down in pit lane, Roger Penske, anxious for news of his driver, concerned also that Fittipaldi had collected some of the debris. They kept Fittipaldi out on the track, but once he was back up to full speed, the car snapped out of control, perhaps due to the debris puncturing a tyre or damaging the rear suspension. Whatever, both Penskes were now lost, and the race was in the hands of Newman Haas. Carl Haas as implacable as ever. Mario Andretti a lap clear of the field, a comfortable enough margin for a man of his experience.
Hey, Goomba!
2 wins out of 2 so far for Newman Haas. Andretti leading the championship by 11 points from Mansell and Berzel. Not as fast as I once was, said Andretti, but still fast enough to win. From Arizona to California for round 3. Long Beach on the site of the old Formula One circuit, but this a shorter version at just under 2 miles round. Nigel Mansell was back, and he qualified in pole position ahead of Tracy and Fittipaldi. But as the pace car brought them round to start, Andretti tangled with Johansson. Stefan Johansson clouting the wall, and he was out before the race even began. Yellow flags remained for 4 laps before the race could get underway properly. Concerns about fuel consumption evaporating. From the green, Tracy attacked.
It's side by side down the front straightaway, headed for corner number 1, and Paul Tracy zooms around the high side of Nigel Mansell.
A great start for Paul Tracy. We saw him put on an excellent show in Phoenix 2 weeks ago on the ovals. Can he do it again on the street circuits? We'll find out. He unfortunately made a little error in Phoenix, and Roger Penske, his team manager, said, well, it's a little bit of inexperience. Nigel Mansell, of course, hugely experienced. Going to be a great battle up front between the Penske Chevrolet and the Lola Ford.
But Tracy's progress abruptly halted about a third of the way through when he punctured, but he was able to pit. Mansell, still not yet fully fit, was running well till he came under pressure from the Canadian Scott Goodyear and dropped to second. There he found Alonso Jr. eager to take him on.
There's little Al trying to get around Nigel. Does he have the line? No! Oh,
He'll get him on the inside of turn 3. Down the inside.
Oh, and they bump.
But it was Unser who came off worst. He regarded Long Beach as his own. He'd won there 4 times in succession from 1988. The body language as he pulled himself out of the cockpit said it all. He believed the accident was Mansell's fault. He thought he'd been deliberately blocked. Final yellow of the race came when Gordon and Cheever disputed the same patch of road and caused a logjam. The most frustrated of all, Arie Luyendyk, who'd stalled and lost ground going into the final laps.
We're back underway at Long Beach.
27 to go when it was all clear again. Tracy, Andretti, Mansell, the 1, 2, 3. Bobby Rahal in 6th started to up the pace at just the right time as the pressure started to tell on the front runners. Andretti stopped with ignition trouble when he was running second. Scott Goodyear retired after clipping the wall. Raul Boesel lost power and dropped out from third place. So Mansell was now third, but it was Paul Tracy first. A fine victory for him, his first in IndyCar racing. Bobby Rahal eventually claimed second, reward for his persistence. A result which left Mansell leading the championship by 4 points from Andretti. Tracy on 22 points, fifth in the championship, 14 points adrift, but bang in form, heading for the Indy 500. The jewel in the crown of the IndyCar series, the Indianapolis 500, in 1993 run for the 77th time. The roll call of winners like a who's who of motorsport. A.J. Foyt, Jim Clark, Graham Hill, Alan Bobby Unser, Rick Mears, Emerson Fittipaldi. They'd all triumphed at this theatre of motor racing dreams. In 1993, Fittipaldi won for the second time as he and Leyendijk swept past Mansell on a late restart. Mansell still led the championship by 7 points from Andretti, with Fittipaldi and Leyendijk third as they went on to round 5 of the series at Milwaukee, a 200-miler around another famous old circuit. For the first time, Raul Boesel snatched pole position, breaking the lap record in the process. Boesel in front, Fittipaldi second, Goodyear third.
It's a green one, and there's the start of the race. 200 miles, 320 kilometers here in the Milwaukee Mile.
Boesel able to take the lead and pull out quite a bit of a gap, considering they've only gone around about half a track.
Stefan Johansson, running 9th, had careered into the wall at turn 2. Out came the pace car. A repeat of the first start, with Boesel ahead from Fittipaldi, Goodyear, Gordon and Tracy doing the chasing. Boesel and Fittipaldi didn't have it all their own way for long. Goodyear determined his plan of attack from third. Fittipaldi was overtaken in traffic, and the leader was next to come under pressure from the Canadian, anxious to make his own mark, with his compatriot Tracy attracting most of the headlines. Goodyear's charge was halted by another yellow. Kudreva pulling off with a heavy smoking Chevy engine after 90 laps. Goodyear's effort was in vain. He'd stopped for a new set of tyres that weren't satisfactory. Tracy reeled him in and took over the lead, with Mansell starting to push for third. Andretti, who'd been holding 5th place, pitted under the yellows. It turned out to be more than a regulation stop. The engine had been sluggish for a couple of laps, but the Newman-Haas crew couldn't discover the cause, and Andretti never again threatened to take points at Milwaukee. Goodyear held 2nd place, but by lap 113, he was out with a blown engine.
So there's only one car in the lead lap, and that's the one you're seeing on your screen. It's Paul Tracy.
Once again, we've seen this happen at Phoenix. He went to a 2-lap lead. Of course, then crashed. There we see Little Al Alonso Jr. coming up alongside Scott Brayton. This is for a position.
Brayton is closing the door on him. Al looks on the inside. There's Iro Matsushita, which complicates matters some. Oh, Adrian Fernandez spills.
And also, our leader gets hooked up in the aftermath. I think it was definitely a Penske Chevrolet getting hooked up.
Tracy was unlucky. Now it was Boesel against Mansell.
Racing in general in the Indy Championship has become much more aggressive since Nigel Mansell made the move over here. We're seeing a lot more blocking than we ever used to see, and a lot more moving chicane action.
And he makes a move. He makes a move on the inside and takes first place. At 181 laps, and now he's trying to pass Al Unser Jr.
That was a great move. Totally took Raul Boesel by surprise. I mean, he knew he was there and coming, but it didn't expect that move from that kind of distance.
And that sort of overtaking was what Nigel Mansell fell victim to before. He's apparently learned that lesson too.
Even a late yellow couldn't disturb Mansell's progress. Learning from Indianapolis, he held off Bazell on the sprint to the checkered flag. At his second attempt, Mansell had won on an oval and confirmed his championship credentials. Fittipaldi, 4 seconds adrift at the finish, but useful points for him. Only the top 4 completed the 200 laps. Mansell's second win of the season, taking him into an 18-point lead in the championship with 11 rounds to go. Paul Tracy, for all his spectacular showmanship, 9th. The Detroit Grand Prix in June, staged for the second year on Belle Isle Park, a much more scenic venue than the old round-the-blocks downtown circuit. Championship leader Mansell claimed pole. Emerson Fittipaldi shared the front row. Tracy and Johansson started from row 2. Fittipaldi and Tracy beat Mansell away from the start, but Fittipaldi had jumped the gun. Complaints from Newman Haas led to officials studying the video replay, and to the annoyance of Penske, they called in the race leader for a stop-go penalty. Fittipaldi out of the pits after a 10-second stop and go, and that left the Penske challenge solely with Paul Tracy. Fittipaldi required a mammoth effort if he was to be back on terms with the leaders quickly. Overtaking notoriously difficult at Detroit. Robbie Boull's collision with the tyre barriers on lap 17 brought out the yellows and reduced the average speed of the race to below 83 miles an hour. Mark Smith, Roberto Guerrero and Scott Pruitt all joined Boull in retirement before lap 20. After a round of pit stops, Mansell took the lead with Johansson in rapid pursuit. Johansson afterwards complaining that Mansell's tactics on the narrow circuit were barely legal. Officials didn't agree. Lap 39, Fittipaldi's race ended with a bump clattering into the tyre wall, painful enough to be submerged beneath a few sets of Goodyears, adding to the indignity. Fittipaldi had been fighting back after his stop-go penalty, attempted to round Arie Luyendyk at a part of the circuit littered with loose debris, and found the back end with a mind of its own. Fittipaldi somehow emerged unscathed. He's always said he hates driving on American freeways. Now, Detroit streets aren't too popular either. But after a smash on the freeway, applause is rare. Nice touch, Emo. Mansell and Johansson were still battling for third rather than the lead now. Rahal and Tracy, first and second. Italian Teo Fabi was next to depart the scene after a mix-up with Mike Grove and Adrian Fernandez. It was this clutch of incidents at about half distance that the whole race hinged on. Eddie Cheever in trouble, battering his rear wing in the barriers, but he managed to keep going. An awkward obstruction for the rest. The Mansell-Johansson battle not settled until Johansson attempted to pass the world champion as he slowed momentarily. Johansson ran out of room and collected Fabi's stranded Lola Chevrolet. But Mansell's advantage didn't last long. He'd picked up a flat tyre as debris became a real problem, and he dropped to 10th as a result. Alonso Jr. came into contention as Paul Tracy was held up by a stop-go penalty for speeding in the pits. Unser battling with his Gallus teammate Danny Sullivan, one of the duels of the Indycar year. There were no team orders. It was the first real chance of the whole season for these two to shine. The spotlight had been centred so far on Mansell and the Penske pair, Fittipaldi and Tracy. Now the two former champions squabbled incessantly over the lead. Sullivan finding it impossible to shake off Unser. In the last 2 seasons, these two great drivers had won only 4 races between them. That's not a fair reflection of their ability. Over 60,000 packed into Belle Isle Park, thrilled by this spectacular, which ended when Sullivan forced Unser into the cones. Unser collected a 10-second penalty, and that effectively was that. Nigel Mansell, working his way back up from 6th place, found his path barred by a safety truck. He ran wide and tested the strength of Detroit's walls, and he came off worst. With 4 laps to go, Sullivan still led. Gordon was now second, but Gordon fell back with a puncture. That left Sullivan to win by over 12 seconds from Raul Boesel. Consistent finishing again from the Brazilian. It was only Sullivan's 3rd podium finish in 3 years. Mario Andretti eventually claimed 3rd at Detroit. Ex-Formula 3000 man Andrea Montermini on his debut in IndyCars made 4th. Nigel Mansell still ahead in the championship, but only by 3 points now from Raul Boesel, who'd not yet won an Indy race. On to Portland, Oregon, with the backdrop of the impressive Mount Hood, one of the most delightful settings for a race in the whole championship. The first permanent road circuit on the fixture list. After the controversies earlier in the season, the stewards warned that they would punish instances of blocking and weaving. Nigel Mansell's insistence that the pole winner should lead at the start line as the green flags waved was challenged successfully by other drivers. Mansell was on pole at Portland and led from Fittipaldi in the opening exchanges. The race order: Mansell, Fittipaldi, Johansson in 3rd, then Tracy, followed by Andretti, Smith, Sullivan in 7th, Gordon and Unser 8th. Portland's 9 previous races had seen 5 Andretti wins, a hat-trick from 1990 for Michael, 2 others for Mario. But Mansell and Fittipaldi set out to distance themselves from the rest of the field around the 1.95-mile course. Mansell, needing a win to kickstart his championship challenge into life again, found Fittipaldi's attentions a handful. Fittipaldi nippier into and out of the corners. Mansell's Lola had the power on the straights. This developed into a fine struggle. Mansell and Fittipaldi with fair respect for each other's abilities, and it was becoming obvious here that by the end of the season, these two would be the prime contenders for the championship. This battle continued for the opening 27 of the 102 laps scheduled. Johansson, Tracy, Andretti, Gordon and Sullivan were trailing. Second in the championship, Boesel was running back in 10th place. Backmarkers threatened to upset the even balance between the 2 front runners, and that gave Stefan Johansson the chance to close up. No American drivers in the leading positions. Still, Mansell resisted the Fittipaldi challenge, and it was down to which of them made the first crucial error. Mansell found himself squirming off course under braking. Not only collected a traffic cone, but also a stop-go penalty, which left Fittipaldi running comfortably in 1st place, Tracy 2nd, Johansson 3rd, and Mansell back in 4th. Mansell began the long fight back. Up front, Fittipaldi driving smoothly, his progress uninterrupted even by the occasional back marker that crossed his path. But heavy cloud building up in the distance threatened to play a part in the race. Johansson departed with engine failure. It was now Fittipaldi, Tracy and Mansell, the 1-2-3. The rain arrived and Fittipaldi took no chances. He went straight in for wet tyres virtually straight away. Fittipaldi and Penske, a generation of racing experience, and this was ace strategy. Exiting the pits, Fittipaldi knew that he'd lost the lead, first to his teammate Tracy and then to Mansell, who decided that his only option was to gamble and stay out on slick tyres as long as possible in the hope that the weather would brighten up. It was a vain hope. Conditions deteriorated further and Mansell was ordered in for a change of tyres. Watching from the end of the pit lane, Mansell saw Fittipaldi thunder through to retake 1st place. Tracy followed, and by the time Mansell was able to resume the circuit, he dropped back to 3rd place with a 6-second leeway to make up to Tracy. Unser, Rahal, Andretti 4th, 5th and 6th. Boesel no better than 8th. Bobby Rahal was the only driver battling on with slick tyres, but his gamble was never likely to pay off. Fittipaldi was increasing his lead to over half a minute, and Tracy proved the advantages of wet tyres in these conditions. With the rain persisting, Fittipaldi was demonstrating his amazing ability gleaned from 30 years in the business. The weather was promising to clear, but it looked likely to be too late to allow anyone else back into the race. Fittipaldi simply had to keep paddling round to secure maximum points. For a man of his calibre, a straightforward task. He'd seen all this before. Rahal's battle with the weather and the slicks came to an end, the last man to change. His gamble had failed. He hadn't managed to improve from 5th, but his decision to stay out sowed the seeds of confusion with the others. The rain was petering out, although the track was still damp, and the teams were starting to think of changing to slicks in time to take full advantage. Penske decided on another gamble for Tracy. With Fittipaldi a clear leader, they switched Tracy onto another set of wet tyres. That effectively lost him second place to Mansell, with 12 laps to go. Already on slicks, Mansell forced his way close to Fittipaldi in an attempt to unlap himself. But Fittipaldi was in no mood to allow the easy pass. Mansell's options were limited. He had to stay on the dry line. His best hope, a forlorn one, was to pressurise Fittipaldi into a mistake. It never came. Fittipaldi's pit crew poised, ready to change their man from wets to slicks. With a whole lap on Mansell, it was a good opportunity, but it was no time for mistakes. Mansell, seeing Fittipaldi pull off into the pit road, now had to make the most of his chance to regain ground. Fittipaldi, restricted to 70 miles an hour in the pit lane, knew that Mansell would be off on a real flyer to be on his tail by the time he emerged with new tyres and refueled from the pits. Having dominated the race, Fittipaldi's hard-won advantage was now in the hands of his crew. A misplaced hose run over by the car would bring a 10-second penalty, as big a calamity as a loose wheel nut. It was a good stop. No errors made. Fittipaldi on his way again, with Mansell yet to come into view. The pit work on this occasion played a huge part in the outcome of the race. Mansell's progress had not been as quick as expected because of the back markers en route. At one point there were 9 cars between him and Fittipaldi. With under 4 miles to go, Mansell was still carving through in a desperate attempt to catch the leader. This was vintage Mansell, shades of Silverstone in 1987, but the odds this time were unsurmountable. Mansell's persistence at Portland earned him a deserved second place. 16 more points in a damage limitation exercise. The Penskes were superior on the day and would have achieved a 1-2 finish were it not for the mistake over Tracy's last tyre choice. Fittipaldi was in a class of his own at Oregon. Penske were running into prime form in mid-season. Perfect timing. Fittipaldi's 19th Indycar victory in his 10th season, and a hat-trick of wins since 1991 at Portland. Mansell second. The back marker's a significant factor in him not being closer than 4 seconds to Fittipaldi. Tracy came in third, a good result for him after his various mishaps. The Penskes were delighted, overcoming the conditions to win through and tighten up the championship. Consistency always going to be the key in the title race. Fittipaldi, Penske's best hope. Now they needed Tracy to take valuable points off Mansell for the rest of the season. In the championship, it was Mansell by 14 from Bazell, a disappointed 7th at Portland. Fittipaldi third, 16 points adrift. Mid-July at the Burke Lakefront Airport in Ohio, a 2.3-mile blast around the wide runways. Fittipaldi, a 3 times winner on the course, but it was teammate Paul Tracy who qualified fastest. He started from pole position, Nigel Mansell second, Fittipaldi and Johansson on row 2. 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the track temperature. A blistering start by Mansell took him past Tracy at the first corner. So there's enough space on the circuit to land a jumbo jet or two, but that wasn't enough for some drivers. Rahal, Guerrero, Alonso, Bazell, Ribbs, Lyondike, all involved in the confusion. Mansell's start had been impressive, but he'd failed to shake off Tracy. The initial skirmish was curtailed by a caution to give the marshals chance to remove the wreckage at the first corner. Guerrero and Rahal badly damaged and out of the race. Mansell and Tracy disputed the lead. Box seats for Fittipaldi, Johansson and Andretti. Mansell under no illusions about the superiority of the Penske chassis, and he was determined to make up the difference on the track through his performance in the cockpit. All the promise of a thriller, though this was a mere trailer for the main feature. The yellow flags were out. It was back behind the pace car for 5 laps. Mansell knew he would be under real pressure from the Penskes for the remainder of the 85 laps when the caution was lifted. The initial incident began as the pack streamed into the right-hander. One bump started it, possibly Lyondike into Rahal. That set off the chain reaction, and it thinned out the field within the first mile. Mansell and Tracy renewed hostilities on the restart, pulling away from Fittipaldi, Johansson, Sullivan and Andretti. Tracy made his move. Mansell couldn't cover all the gaps on the wide circuit, and Tracy spotted and took his chance like a veteran, a smoothly executed manoeuvre. Mansell now in the business of clinging on for second place as Tracy, with a clear track ahead, started to pull away. Fittipaldi running in a conservative third, satisfactory in the early stages, preserving his car and his tyres, set for a late charge if need be. Tracy was scattering all before him. A fabulous drive from the young Canadian. Mansell admitting afterwards that the Penske was too quick to be caught. The leaders flying round, Mansell on the very edge of control in a bid to keep position. No slackening of pace from Tracy, determined to shake off Mansell and put a significant gap between himself and the world champion before the first round of pit stops were due at about 30 laps. Mansell was equally determined not to lose Tracy or fall back into the clutches of the advancing Fittipaldi. An excellent race developing, but the Penskes, especially Tracy, were dominant. The distance between Tracy and Mansell fluctuated from a split second to half a dozen. But no doubting just who was loving being in control. After 80 laps, Danny Sullivan and Alonso Jr., teammates who'd clashed at Detroit, were in dispute again. Unser fighting his way back up the field after a delay in the pits. Sullivan battling to hold on to fifth. Unser thought he was past. Going quickly enough to take the line into the left-hander, Sullivan obviously didn't think so, and this was the result. An embarrassment for the team and the drivers. There may be no team orders, but it doesn't mean they can play stock cars. Sullivan said it was Al Unser's fault. Unser was convinced Sullivan was the culprit. Unser said it must have been Sullivan who caused it because he came in from behind. He has a point. Perhaps Sullivan would settle for putting racing accident on the insurance claim. Meanwhile, Tracy was gallivanting away at the head of the field. Since winning at Long Beach, he'd blotted his copybook by crashing at Milwaukee when leading. Better outing at Portland encouraged his growing band of supporters. This effort was sensational. He broke the back of the rest of the field, increased his lead over Mansell from 9 to 12 and then to 20 seconds after the second round of pit stops, and he put the issue way beyond doubt. Nobody who saw this performance had any illusions about the young Canadian's future. Roger Penske was moulding a potential champion. May look a studious college boy type, but he's one of the discoveries of the decade. 6 years after broadening his experience by racing in Britain in junior formula. Mansell, meanwhile, was finding his car becoming more and more difficult to handle, and inevitably Fittipaldi gained ground. Fittipaldi had been penalised 10 seconds for collecting a marker cone. The challenge was taken up, 16 laps left, second place at stake. Fittipaldi's car improving as the race wore on, and he was now lapping as quickly as Tracy. He took second place for the first time from Mansell, but that was hardly the end of the matter. developed into the kind of duel that brings out the best in these two. Fittipaldi driving superbly, protecting the racing line. Mansell grimly determined, desperate to find a way past. Eventually he managed to return the compliment and assume second place, but Fittipaldi, in peerless form, was not to be beaten. As these two scrapped and hustled round Burke Lakefront Airport, Paul Tracy was hurtling towards a superb victory. He was unlikely to be caught now. It's doubtful if Fittipaldi or Mansell at this stage remembered that second instead of third place made a difference of a mere 2 points. This was for pride. When that's on the line, this is the type of race that's delivered. One local sports writer described the battle that ensued as being like two heavyweight prize fighters slugging it out with lefts and rights, neither of them prepared to submit. It was more graceful than that, and infinitely more sporting. Here were two masters of their craft at work, and those who watched, in sheer admiration, felt privileged and honoured to have witnessed this glorious showdown. It was so good that it took some of the gloss away from Tracy's brilliant drive. As the crowd filed out of the circuit, the talk was of Fittipaldi and Mansell. Fittipaldi eventually claimed second place with 7 laps to go, after they'd passed and repassed each other 5 times each. Great driving, great excitement. Away from the drama for second, Tracy was 18 seconds ahead of the field at the end of 85 laps. So he went on to record his second IndyCar win of his short career, having pulverised the field with a superb display. He'd averaged over 127 miles an hour and set up the prospect of a home win back in his native Toronto next time out. Tracy first, Fittipaldi second, Mansell third. The pendulum had swung in favour of the Penske's in the last couple of races. Newman Haas had some thinking, development and testing to do as the season reached the halfway stage. Stefan Johansson, driving a Penske for the Bettenhausen team, made it 3 Penskes in the top 4. Raul Boesel, third in the championship now, lost more ground. He only managed a 7th place. Well, they've been racing around Exhibition Place in Toronto since 1986, but never had a hometown driver been favoured to win before. This year, Paul Tracy was not just back to come home first, he was expected to. Fittipaldi on pole, but no result will be more suitable than Tracy first to the checkered flag at the end of 103 laps around the 1.8-mile street circuit. He was second quickest in qualifying, Rahal third, Sullivan fourth. Mansell crashed twice and started 9th. But his championship lead was now seriously threatened. Fittipaldi led, Tracy, Rahal, Sullivan followed. An early yellow prevented the Penske's running away with it. That seemed a distinct possibility with the lack of competitiveness over the weekend from Nigel Mansell. Another yellow. Andrea Montemini in difficulty, a blown engine and in a precarious position after spinning on his own oil. Ribbs, Kogan and Greco were soon caught up in the incident that again brought the field back together. The stop-start race was exactly against the wishes of the Penske's and the crowd, who would have been delighted to see Tracy lapping the circuit all on his own. The restart eventually came on lap 15. Tracy, having gone past Fittipaldi, led. Sullivan, Rahal, Johansson followed. Mansell was trapped back in 12th place and unable to make any headway on another street circuit where overtaking was at best difficult. Fittipaldi, informed of Mansell's problems, settled for second. Tracy opened out, extending his advantage to almost 3 seconds over the rest before Fittipaldi started to pull him back. Superiority from the Penske's, but Sullivan was enjoying his best run since Detroit, and he seemed capable of claiming a podium position. The Sullivan view, in this instance, hold on to what you got. Lyondike 9th after early problems, now his race ruined with a complete loss of oil pressure. Once again, the Penske's were brought back into touch with the rest of the runners. but the disruption disturbed Tracy's rhythm and concentration. He was almost caught out by slow-moving Farby. Then he botched a pit stop when he couldn't find first gear. Fittipaldi, who'd also stopped for tyres and fuel, came out ahead. This was not in the Canadian script. Lyondike, meanwhile, relived the frustrations of Long Beach. Fittipaldi first, Tracy second with ground to make up. Neither car had missed a beat. It appeared to be down to the drivers to determine the outcome of a difficult race. The pace car bunched the remaining cars together once more. The Penske's, Sullivan and Unser, Rahal and Gordon the order. From the restart, only a second or so covered the top 6. Then the pace began to tell again in favour of the Penske's. Fittipaldi set the standard, reeling off laps approaching qualifying speed, well under a minute for the 1 3/4 miles. Back in the pack, Mansell still running but finding it impossible to make any serious impression. Sullivan and Unser still harboured serious ambitions in the chase, but realistically it was Fittipaldi or Tracy, with the crowd anxious for the local hero. Fittipaldi held him off. Fittipaldi from Tracy. Danny Sullivan was in third place, waiting for a slip from the front two. Nigel Mansell's miserable race rolled to a gentle close. The engine boost gone after a wastegate problem. He trailed back to retire after a desperate weekend. The team's fortunes at a low ebb with 9 races gone of the season, the car seemingly out of sorts, while the Penske's were in excellent shape. It was the first mechanical failure of the season for Mansell, the first time he'd failed to score apart from Phoenix. 20 laps left. Tracy claimed first again, staying out longer than Emerson Fittipaldi before the final stop. He had no problems when he did call in for tyres and fuel and emerged from the pits just ahead of his teammate, to the delight of the spectators. They inspired him to a 13-second lead in no time, and he won at a canter, the first Canadian to win at home since Gilles Villeneuve won the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal in 1978. A great win, his second in a row, and it was celebrated in style, the day Tracy became a championship contender. Sullivan, Rahal, Unser and Gordon made up the top 6. Bazell 7th. He was being overwhelmed in the title race. Fittipaldi assumed the lead in the championship. Tracy up to 4th. He was the man to watch with 7 rounds to go. After the Indy 500, the toughest race in the championship is the Michigan 500 on a bumpy 2-mile oval just down the road from Detroit. First day of August, Mansell hadn't won since Milwaukee almost 2 months before. But here, Newman Haas were in peak form. Andretti on pole position after a record average speed of 234.2 miles an hour for any close course anywhere in the world. Mansell was second. And after the Penske 1-2 at Toronto, a good result was vital here for Mansell. Andretti with a decent start from the green. Lyondike from the second row quicker than Mansell, and he swept into second place. Mansell was stung by that and probed for the opening. But Lyondike held second behind Andretti for the rest of the opening lap. He kept up the pace throughout lap 2. Mansell still unable to find a way past as they hurtled round at an average speed of 220 miles an hour. It was taking a mere 30 seconds to lap the vast Michigan Bowl. Impressive on full tanks so early in the race. Andretti opening up a gap between himself and Leyendijk. But Leyendijk's resistance was starting to crumble. Mansell, refusing to be denied, surged past in impressive style. Mansell's rapid ascent of the learning curve on ovals had been astonishing. Since his mishap at Phoenix, he'd finished third at Indianapolis and then won at Milwaukee. Now he was demonstrating oval technique to the rest. Newman Haas, 1-2, declared that they were back in decent shape after their period in the doldrums. The Penske's on home ground were back behind Goodyear and Bazell. It was Goodyear next in the frame, moving up to challenge Leyendijk, whose early promise had started to fade as the pace quickened. Goodyear third. Bazell, enjoying a renewed surge of form, was next, taking Leyendijk, a former Indy 500, with a minimum of fuss. And what had been second for Leyendijk became sixth when Tracy came up to follow Goodyear and Bazell. Eventually Tracy worked his way through to third, but on the day little could be done about the Newman-Haas pair. Mansell and Andretti in opposition. These two had been in the same team over a decade ago when Mansell made his Formula One debut for Lotus with Andretti as his team leader. Mansell into the lead on lap 28, and gradually he started to ease away from his teammate. Mansell's performance all the more impressive since he went into the race feeling unwell and hammering round in excess of 200 miles an hour over the rickety-rackety bumps wasn't making him feel any better. He had aspirin added to his water bottle at a later pit stop to help him through. Supreme stuff from the Newman-Haas pair. Stefan Johansson argued with the Michigan wall and came off worse, scattering bits of Bettenhausen and Penske over the track for Fittipaldi and Alonso Jr. to collect. Both punctured, both were able to rejoin. Mansell avoided the problem and swept on into the lead. Called in for tyres and fuel as Mario Andretti prepared to leave from the bay behind him. Quite why Mario managed to get himself into such a spin is not clear, but his method of regaining momentum in the right direction was spectacular. Mansell departed the pit lane, resisting the temptation to illustrate his pirouette. Back out on the track, it was down to relentless lapping at over 200 miles an hour. The only variety when the pit score was necessary. Otherwise it was out there, foot down, turn left. But not as much as this, Mr. Andretti. For a moment disconcerting, but performed with a touch of class and style. Mansell still running first, but Raul Bazell had slipped past Andretti for second place during Andretti's escapades in pit road. Mansell came up to lap Bazell, demonstrating the superiority of the Newman-Haas Lola on the day at Michigan. Bazell, championship hopes receding, saw them swamped at that moment. Mansell and Andretti continued to set sensational times around the oval. Even after taking account of cautions, the average speed was approaching 190 miles an hour. Andretti's recovery from his pit stop was complete when he found Bazell in his sights and he came through to snatch second place again. Mansell first, Andretti second, Bazell third. The Penske struggling for power. Tracy was the first to be sidelined when his Chevrolet engine gave out after 114 laps and he was unable to pedal it back. Stopping out on the course meant another yellow, but Tracy's teammate Emerson Fittipaldi was unable to capitalise. He languished back in the pack. The car was proving a brute to handle over the bumps, and the Penske crew had a look of resignation about them. Tracy's hopes of a hat-trick, scarcely realistic after qualifying, were now dust. Mansell was poised to regain the lead in the championship. The restart came with more than half the race remaining, but little doubt about the outcome. Mansell first, Andretti second. It became a question of whether they'd finish on the same lap in a grandstand finale. Andretti, forced to pick his way round back markers, lost ground initially till he caught up the pace again. It became cut and thrust between 5 and 6 on the banks. Andretti threatening, Mansell quick enough to respond. Entertaining stuff, but the challenge from outside had been snuffed out so effectively. Newman-Haas ruled at the home of Penske. With around 100 laps left, this was the most serious battle on the track. Mario Andretti, 53 years old, and after 30 years in IndyCar racing, showing he wasn't ready to be pensioned off yet. While these two battled out on the track, Carl Haas kept a note of developments. Lap 190. Mansell came through to take Andretti again. 60 laps and 2 more rounds of pit stops to go. Still the pace was unrelenting. Fittipaldi's unhappy day dragged on. 9th place was not a good performance by the recent Penske high standards. It became worse. He slipped down to 14th by the finish, some 13 laps off completing the full distance. Andretti pushed Mansell all the way to the finish. Fine effort by the Englishman in the circumstances. He was feeling sick, he had a rotten headache. Just the 2 Newman-Haas cars were on the lead lap by the close, the later laps being run at an average of over 225 miles an hour. Mansell first, Andretti second. Delight for the co-owners Newman and Haas. Their first 1-2 of the season, and more importantly, a swing in fortunes away from the Penskes. Mansell careered on, oblivious at the end to the win. He was feeling so ill. But it was an excellent all-round performance from the team and restored their momentum in the title race. It was a great result in the toughest epic of the year. Mansell 1, Andretti 2, Lyndike 3rd for the first time since Indianapolis, Bazell 4th, 2 laps back, Goodyear and Fabi made up the top 6. Mansell back in front in the championship after that victory, 18 points ahead of Fittipaldi. Andretti in the picture as well, 4th overall. Nigel Mansell's 40th birthday coincided with the race at New Hampshire, the second weekend of August. After the excellent 1-2 only the week before, Newman-Haas were buoyant for the visit to the 1-mile oval at Loudon. Mansell duly qualified in pole position, alongside him Raul Bazell. Paul Tracy started from the second row. Fittipaldi was 13th on the grid, but only 7/10 of a second slower than Mansell. Mansell away from the second start after Greco and Wood had collided. Bazell, Goodyear and Tracy running behind him. Mansell quickest, heading away from Bazell, dispiriting sight for those on the chase. Tracy the first to improve from behind, moving up on Goodyear. Fairly even match between these two Canadians. Tracy had captured most of the attention and the headlines over the season, but Goodyear was a capable performer as well. On this occasion, Tracy with the advantage of a marginally better setup. But Goodyear didn't know when he was beaten. Tracy trying to make up ground on the leaders. Still coming under pressure from Goodyear. But Tracy was the likeliest man to come through and threaten Mansell's first place. Reacting to Tracy's charge, Mansell stepped on the gas and continued untroubled. Lyondike, third last time out, dropped out after 32 laps, finding his Ganassi Lola's handling progressively deteriorating. Tracy's improvement continued apace. He was now on a par with Mansell and slipped into the lead. The shifting pattern of fortunes in the IndyCar season illustrated there, with the previous week's loser taking the outstanding winner. Behind Tracy and Mansell, the order was changing rapidly. Hitting form at last, Roberto Guerrero. He went past Raul Boesel for third place. Never before in 1993 that he achieved such a lofty position. Emerson Fittipaldi was coming through, having made up 9 places in the 57 laps so far. He was to make it Penske 1 and 3 with Mansell in the sandwich. Fittipaldi obviously regaining his appetite for the race. After a yellow had delayed proceedings, Tracy lost the lead to Mansell in the pits. Fittipaldi came up to challenge his teammate on lap 85 of 200. Using the slipstream brilliantly, Fittipaldi executed the perfect oval passing manoeuvre. Fittipaldi second, Tracy third. Fittipaldi in brilliant form and ready to move on Mansell. Mansell had enjoyed a relatively easy passage since assuming first place, but behind him Fittipaldi was threatening, and Tracy had started to run at full throttle again. But the prime danger was Fittipaldi. Fittipaldi looking for a gaggle of back markers to delay Mansell and enable him to make up the remaining ground. On a 1 mile oval, it doesn't take long before the slower cars are back in view. Fittipaldi waiting for the chance. But Mansell wasn't going to present it to him, and he's unlikely to be fazed by Fittipaldi's aggressive intentions. But Mansell, being wary of Fittipaldi, didn't spot Tracy moving up until he was almost on him. Tracy had the momentum. Seizing the chance, dived past to take first place for the first time in this race. Mansell's response was immediate, straight from page 1 of the Champion's Handbook. Tracy, though, was in such excellent form that Mansell in close proximity was of little concern. The first 3, Tracy, Mansell, Fittipaldi, proceeded to dart through the traffic. Only Raul Boesel on the lead lap with them, and he was being hauled in. Danny Sullivan, meanwhile, departed the scene with handling problems. The top 3 continued to dominate. Mansell looking for the opportunity to go ahead again. Coming up to lap 121, Boesel in 4th place was lapped by Tracy, then lost out to Mansell and Fittipaldi and promptly thumped the wall. The pace car was ushered into action. Mansell dived for the pits, good tactics usually in such circumstances, but he lost a place as a result of a cross-threaded wheel nut. The crew didn't panic, promptly replaced it, but Mansell resumed 3rd, with Tracy 1st and Fittipaldi 2nd. The long run round behind the pace car removed the need for any more pit stops. Another yellow on lap 145 when Goodyear and Andretti collided. Mario Andretti not in the best of moods as he made his way back to his motorhome. Scott Goodyear had some explaining to do. He did his best, but perhaps wasn't totally convincing. "26 laps to go. Nigel Mansell, unhappy at being relegated to third, decided to go on the attack. Fittipaldi first in his sights. Mansell passed. Now for Tracy, who'd opened out a reasonable lead. This was Mansell at his best, pouncing on back markers and aggressively demanding a way through. Soon he'd made up the difference to the race leader.
Tracy's blocking, no question about it. Look at that move on the outside.
He's going to keep pushing them out there too. Stay out there, Nigel, get caught up behind.
Oh, this is it. Mansell takes the lead with 4 laps to go. What a move. No question that Mansell has the best setup and perhaps even more horsepower here. And he's taking that position, and Tracy is not challenging yet. Oh, here's Guillard, watch out. Nigel has to be very careful. Now it's Tracy that's putting the heat on him, on the outside.
Nigel doing a bit of a weave job there.
That's close.
That is very close for open wheel racing at 162 miles an hour as they go into that, or come out of that corner. Down the backstretch, 3 laps to go. Tracy right behind Nigel Mansell. This is for the win at the New Hampshire 200 on the New Hampshire International Speedway. Paul Tracy trying to make up that gap.
2 laps to go. Unbelievable. With only 3 laps to go, Nigel Mansell finally makes the move, takes the lead again. For the 3rd time in this race, he started out up front for the first 40 laps, and in lap 67, he came back up front for about 26 laps, and now back again up front.
You're going to see the white flag displayed here, signifying 1 lap to go. This is the last chance for Paul Tracy. Emerson Fittipaldi is going to have to settle for 3rd place. Paul Tracy looks like he's unable to make up that gap. Nigel Mansell just seems a little quicker down the backstretch, and at this point, Paul Tracy is nowhere near enough to make a move. You can only hope someone's right in front of Nigel, but there is not anyone there.
Indeed, as they come around this turn 4, they're coming around. The checkered flag is ready. Jimson Toll waves both flags, and Nigel Mansell scores his 2nd consecutive win.
And what a way to celebrate a birthday. Mansell the winner, as 4 foreign drivers came home in the first 4 positions at New Hampshire, with Colombian Roberto Guerrero taking 4th, a lap back from the leaders. Mansell's lead in the championship stretched to 25 points after back-to-back victories on ovals, with 5 races remaining. Road America in late August for round 12, the 4-mile road course in Wisconsin, the favourite of many IndyCar drivers. Paul Tracy had a huge accident in qualifying. He spent most of the meeting limping around on crutches, but he still claimed pole position, with Nigel Mansell 2nd quickest, Mario Andretti 3rd. The race, over 50 laps.
And we're green. Paul Tracy surges again to the front of the field. Nigel Mansell chases. Andretti battles for 3rd place against Raul Boisel as Mansell comes in right behind Paul Tracy. And Tracy leads him through the first corner. Now downhill, and a tremendous set of elevation changes at this track.
The opening exchanges curtailed as early as lap 4 when the first yellow appeared. The field crawling round until the wreckage of the Adrian Fernandez Gallus Lola had been shifted. Not for the first time during the season, Fernandez had lost control and crashed heavily. Amazingly, after such an impact, Fernandez was able to walk away with nothing more serious than a bruised knee. Tracy ahead again on the restart. A second ahead in no time. Despite his injuries, he was in tremendous form, and long before the end had made certain of his 4th victory of the year. Mansell couldn't match him, let alone catch the young Canadian. Tracy thundered around past the spot where he'd gone off 48 hours earlier after what was thought to be suspension failure. Brilliant victory for Tracy. Averaged over 118 miles an hour. He was almost 28 seconds ahead of Mansell by the checkered flag. A win that breathed new life into his championship challenge. Rahal third, Mansell fourth, Fittipaldi only fifth. The championship with 4 races left between Mansell, Fittipaldi and Tracy. Vancouver, British Columbia, the last weekend in August, round 13 of 16. A Canadian took pole, not Tracy, but Goodyear. Only his second pole position of the season. Of the championship contenders, Mansell third, Tracy fourth, Fittipaldi 10th. Goodyear away from the start, Rahal second, Tracy third. Mansell dropping back to fourth as Gordon made another decent start up from 6th. Mansell dropped back even further. Under 30 seconds into the race, and the first confusion, Scott Brayton clipping Harry Lyondike and the Dutchman unlucky again. Moments later, Grouillard's spin balked John Unser and Wood, and it was back to square one. Again, Goodyear away first. Rahal and Tracy in pursuit. Rahal's adventurous approach to the right-hander let Tracy in. And it was Canada first and second in Vancouver. Then Tracy persuaded Goodyear to brake late and run wide. Tracy through to snatch first place. Rahal followed him, leaving Goodyear third. Breathtaking stuff in the early laps. Tracy, Rahal and Goodyear, the 1, 2, 3. Unser Jr. was fourth, Mansell fifth. Tracy suddenly hit trouble. Slowed at turn 1, allowed Goodyear and Rahal through. The alternator playing up had stopped Tracy's charge. Now Rahal leading, Alonso Jr. in pursuit and Goodyear third. Mansell falling back down the order. Rahal quick enough to hold off Alonso Jr. In the absence of Fittipaldi, Tracy and Mansell suddenly saw 20 points as a possibility. Rahal's pit stop on lap 64 handed Unser the initiative. Unser had sufficient fuel to stay out 2 extra laps. He capitalised and built an unassailable lead, lapping Emerson Fittipaldi along the way. Fittipaldi out of contention and settling for 7th place. Mansell satisfied with 6th. Alonso Jr.'s first win for 18 months. He came home by 11 seconds from Rahal and Johansson. Morale-boosting win for Alonso Jr. None of the championship contenders were in the first 5, so little had changed with 3 races left. Mansell still ahead by 33 points, but Tracy was now 46 adrift, and he needed a miracle. The odds favoured Mansell to pull it off at the first time of asking. Mansell could ensure the championship at Mid-Ohio in September, given a sufficient margin over Fittipaldi. Fittipaldi badly required a win. Mansell on pole position from Tracy, Fittipaldi and then Mansell. 89 laps the race. From the start, Mansell away, but Tracy shadowing him. Mike Grove was pushed off at the first corner. As Mansell and Tracy jockeyed for position, shooting away on up the hill. Tracy moved across Mansell's bows. He removed part of the front wing and damaged the steering. Mansell fell back. Tracy swept on. Mansell blamed Tracy. Tracy insisted he had the line into the corner. Mansell went into the pits for repairs, efficiently performed by the team. He emerged to a pace car situation, and joining ahead of it incurred a 10-second stop-and-go penalty to further delay him. The chances of clinching the championship here were now remote. Tracy lasted only until lap 21 when he tripped up behind the slow-moving Scott Pruitt and smacked head-on into the tyre wall. In that moment, Tracy realised his slim chance of the title had vanished. Following the caution, Fittipaldi settled his plan of campaign. With Mansell out of it, he had to go full out for the win. Goodyear was the immediate problem, but he was seen off by holding the inside line into the tight right-hander. Alonso Jr., running in third place, spotted his chance to move up. It was Fittipaldi in control. Second place was still under dispute. Gordon, Goodyear and Bazell were all involved in this squabble. Gordon went on to second, Goodyear fighting all the way with Bazell to keep third. Meanwhile, Fittipaldi toured home with 16 seconds to spare. His third win at Mid-Ohio, his second in succession. With Mansell only 12th, Fittipaldi had cut the championship lead to just 14 points. An opportune win for the wily Fittipaldi. 44 points available before the end of the season, and he'd thrown himself a lifeline. The balance of power still with Mansell, but Fittipaldi still had a shout after his first win since the end of June. Bazell passed Tracy for third in the championship, but after Mid-Ohio, it was a case of then there were two. Foul weather ruined qualifying at Nazareth. They lined up as per the championship standings. Mansell on pole, Fittipaldi alongside. 200 laps of the tri-oval, and Mansell lost the advantage at the very start. The Penskes were quickest away from the green, Fittipaldi ahead of Tracy, and Mansell left to cling on. He was coming under pressure from the rest of the pack as he struggled to find the right line on the tiny circuit. Bazell closing on Mansell, and on lap 4 he came up to go past, and the three front runners opened up a gap. Without a doubt, the Penskes were the quickest on the circuit. Fittipaldi needing the win, but Tracy was not in charitable mood. Hustling the ex-champion for position, his intention was clear. Eventually, Tracy found his way through. On lap 11, he saw his chance to go ahead, and he took it. With the Penskes so superior, team orders could be determined later. It was Tracy first, Fittipaldi second, then Bazell third. Mansell was battling to keep his car on line. It took him 27 laps to come to grips with the problem. Solution found, a slight change to the recommended racing line, and he made progress. By lap 37, he was in a position to tackle Fittipaldi. He went past him for second. Now he had the whip hand in the championship, and he was determined to settle it here. He caught Tracy rapidly, within 2 laps of taking Fittipaldi. Tracy's handling was now deteriorating. He couldn't respond if Mansell attacked. After one attempt, Mansell made it past and led the race. He lapped his teammate Mario Andretti on Andretti's hometown circuit. He looked unstoppable. It was now up to Fittipaldi to keep the championship alive by fighting back. But the challenge to Nigel Mansell came not from Emerson Fittipaldi, but from Scott Goodyear. Goodyear took Fittipaldi for second and then set off in pursuit of the leader. Mansell first, Goodyear second. Fittipaldi lost third to Lyondike. It was advantage Mansell approaching half distance.
Fittipaldi is the fourth place car, just ahead of Mansell. And Mansell wants to lap him. Mansell wants to discourage him psychologically if he can. Say, look, I can put you a lap down. You're not just in fourth, you're a mile behind.
Well, whatever team orders that Penske may have had or may have instigated with Paul Tracy, he needs a lot of help now because the handling of this car is not going to put them in a position to realistically challenge Mansell at the moment from what we can see.
Averaging 156 miles an hour, well above the race record. And look at Mansell just sweep around Fittipaldi, puts him a lap down, and continues his surge forward.
Mansell had the race in his pocket. It was now up to Fittipaldi to produce a surprise finish. Fittipaldi couldn't afford to drop another place to fifth. If he did and Mansell won, it was the end of the championship. Fittipaldi's car was not capable of responding under attack. With only Goodyear on the lead lap with Mansell, Fittipaldi dropped the one vital place behind Tracy and Gordon. There was no yellow flag to cause Mansell any late problems. It was all but decided.
And there is the checkered flag for Nigel Mansell. The Kmart Haviland Lola takes the win, and in doing so, takes the IndyCar championship.
Nigel Mansell, IndyCar champion 1993, the first man ever to win Formula One and IndyCars back-to-back. Laguna Seca, California, an end-of-term atmosphere. The Penske's quickest in qualifying, Fittipaldi ahead of Tracy, Mansell and Sullivan making up the second row. Tracy away quickly ahead of Fittipaldi, building a lead of 3 seconds in 3 laps. Fittipaldi ahead of Mansell, who was holding off Sullivan and Lyondike. By half distance, Mansell had dropped a couple of positions and was attempting to claw his way back when he came across backmarker Scott Sharp making his IndyCar debut. Mansell was delayed, dropped positions to Johansson and Goodyear, and eventually retired after another collision with Mark Smith.
If those belts are very loose, it doesn't seem that Paul Tracy is beginning to show it. He's actually been inspired by the presence of Fittipaldi just behind him and has been pulling away.
Tracy broke away when Fittipaldi was cornered by Matsushita. Fittipaldi lucky to be able to resume. But despite appearances, he was able to make progress back through the field to claim second place again behind Tracy. Tracy was away in the distance, leading by 30 seconds and almost able to drive and admire the view in the closing laps. Tracy's 5th win of the season, equal with Mansell. A future champion without doubt. Fittipaldi 2nd, Lyondike 3rd, Goodyear, Allenser Jr., all drivers who'd had some success over the year on the leaderboard. But the season belongs to the man who began as Formula One world title holder and finished the IndyCar champion. Nigel Mansell, the first man in history to win the IndyCar title at his first attempt.